Hello friends, welcome back. Right, we've talked about the uses of cross elasticity of demand. The next thing we want to look at, when we started defining elasticity, we talked about the responsiveness as a result of a change in the price, as a result of a change in the price of related commodities, and as a result of change in income. So now let's talk about income elasticity of demand. It is the relative responsiveness of demand to changes in the income of the consumer. So the change in income of the consumer can also affect the quantity the consumer will demand. So the absolute magnitude or responsiveness and size, that is whether the good is normal, basic necessity or inferior, are very important in income elasticity of demand. Let's note these. If the coefficient is positive, the good is a normal good. If the coefficient is negative, the good is an inferior good. The coefficient, I mean the answer we get when we calculate the elasticity. If it is a negative, it's an inferior good. All the classifications of price elasticity of demand applies also to income elasticity of demand. Something very important to take note of. Right. Alright, so let's look at how to calculate income elasticity of demand. So the secret about elasticity is, what you have to know is the nature of the formula. The formula is always the same, like this. If it is price elasticity of demand, this becomes P. If it is cross elasticity of demand, if this is QX, this becomes PY. Now, income elasticity of demand, Y represents income. So it's change in Q, that's change in quantity demanded, divided by change in income, times income, that is the initial income, divided by the initial quantity demanded. So this is a point elasticity of income. With examples we've solved in point elasticity of demand and point cross elasticity of demand and others, I believe it's with that understanding you can always solve a question on point elasticity of income. Now let's look at arc elasticity of income also. As we have discussed over and over, this also follows the same. So change in quantity demanded divided by previous quantity demanded plus current quantity demanded, all divided by change in income. As I mentioned, Y represents income. So change in income divided by previous income plus current income. So take this question, try your hand on it, and let's see if you have mastered it. When a consumer's income was 1,000 Ghana cedis, quantity demanded was 20 units. As his income increased to 1,500 Ghana cedis, quantity demanded increased to 25 units. Calculate the income, that is point elasticity of demand. Secondly, interpret the magnitude of the coefficient and also interpret the sign attached to the coefficient. Try this question also, question 7. Now let me get back to question 6. I know you can calculate the income of that is a point elasticity of demand. Now the second is interpret the magnitude of the coefficient. So tell me, if you calculate and you get a positive, is it an inferior good or is it a normal good? If you calculate and you get a negative, is it an inferior good or a normal good? That even answers the third question. So the sign will show whether it's a normal good or an inferior good. Let me just remind you, if you calculate and you get a positive, that means the commodity is a normal good. If you calculate and you get a negative, it is an inferior good. Now let's look at the II. Interpret the magnitude of the coefficient. If you calculate and you get a number greater than 1, it means it is income elastic. If it is less than 1, it is income inelastic. If it is equal to 0, it is income unit elastic. If it is 0, it is income perfectly inelastic. And if it is infinity or less than infinity, it is income perfectly elastic. Try your hand on this also. It is just the same scenario. There is something interesting about this I would want you to note so that you wouldn't struggle so much with this question. For commodity A, as a consumer's income increased from 100 Ghana cedis to 150 Ghana cedis. Quantity demanded remained at the initial 20 units. So what will be Q1? Q1 will be 20. What will be Q2? Is that quantity demanded remained. So Q2 will also be 20. I just want to give you this clue so that you wouldn't struggle with it. So Q1, Q2 minus Q1, change in Q. Q2 minus Q1. Remember that 20 minus 20, you get 0. So after everything, your final answer will be 0. And if it is 0, interpret it. Interpret it. Great. Great. So the next we want to look at is uses of income elasticity of demand. Income elasticity of demand also, is it very important? Yes, it is. The first is it is useful to traders. Traders are those selling the commodity, but you have to know what will happen, what will consumers do when their income is very low, what will consumers do when their income is very high. It helps you know how many of the goods to order. There are some commodities that are normally considered as inferior. Traders have known and they consider them as inferior. So it tells them where to sell such commodities. In Ghana, let me talk about a commodity like, well, you can disagree with me, but let's talk about a commodity like Gari. When people become rich, they stop eating Gari. They focus their consumption on fried rice and all others. So, if people will sell Gari, they won't sell it at residential areas. They will sell it at areas where people are not very rich. So it has helped traders to know where to sell a good that is considered as inferior. So in this case, Gari may be considered as inferior. Not inferior to everyone anyway, because when you go to Nigeria, Gari is not really inferior. But so in Ghana or some places in Ghana, when you have less income, you buy more of Gari. But when you have more income, you buy less. So it means it's inferior. All right. It helps also in classification of goods. So if you're able to classify a good you are selling as inferior or normal, it helps you know how to price it, how to sell it, and everything. So income elasticity, knowing the income elasticity of a good will help you even for the first time. It will help you classify your good to be either ostentatious, prestigious, normal, inferior, or even a necessity. Right. It all depends on knowing the magnitude and the magnitude of the good and the sign of the good. The magnitude of the elasticity you calculate and the sign of the elasticity. So if you calculate and you get a negative answer, it means that your good is an inferior good. So you classify it as inferior. And the last is it guides government in formulating employment policy. So for government to formulate an employment policy, why does government employ? Basically, government employs people as human resources to engage in the production of goods and services. So if government would want to employ more people, the government will employ more people to produce a good that will be bought at the end. So for a decision on employment to be made, the elasticity, the income elasticity of the good or service that will be produced should be known. And knowing it, it will give you an idea on whether it will be purchased or patronized after it is produced. If it will be patronized, the government will employ more people so that more of such goods are produced, and vice versa. Right. So we are drawing the curtains down, but I want to talk about demand forecasting. Have you heard the word forecasting before? Demand now is familiar. You are familiar to demand, but have you heard the word forecasting before? Forecasting is predicting into the future what will happen if I make this decision. What will happen? So all organizations operate in an atmosphere of uncertainty. No one has gone into the future and has come back. Someone will tell you, "Oh, I went into tomorrow and I saw this. So let's just wait. This is what will happen tomorrow." No, it doesn't really happen. So we are in an atmosphere of uncertainty. But in spite of the uncertainty, decisions must be made today We don't know what will happen in the future, but decisions must be made today. And those decisions are supposed to be decisions that will affect the future of the organization you are working in. And if you are a manager, you have to make decisions that will bring a positive effect on the organization. Because of that, you have to always forecast. So a forecast is a prediction or estimate of a future situation under given conditions. And every company produces either a good or a service. So your good or service must be demanded. By that, you would have to know how to forecast what the demand of your good or service in the future will be. That is what brings us to the importance of demand forecasting. Now, what are some of the applications of demand forecast? It has short-run decisions. It has implications in the short run in making decisions and also in the long run. So the major short-run decisions are, first, purchase of goods. If you're able to forecast your demand accurately with a lot of precision, it will help you know how many inputs to purchase. The inputs are what will be used to produce the output. Alright, the second is it helps you maintain the economic level of inventory. Inventory is the goods you have not yet sold. You have produced them though, but you have not yet sold them. So it helps you know how many goods to keep. If the demand is going to fall, then that means you have to sell all now so that you benefit now. So it helps you know the level of inventory to keep. All these are short-run decisions. The third is setting up sales targets. It helps you know the target you are supposed to give to your sales personnel or your sales manager. It also helps you to distribute network. If you are able to forecast that, the demand for my commodity will be very high in Greater Accra region. It will be very high in Brong Ahafo region. But as for Volta region, it will be very low. It will help you know how to network. Your networking will go to Greater Accra and Brong Ahafo region, and you reduce your distribution or your allocation to Volta region. The third is the next is it helps in management of working capital. Working capital is the money or what the resources you have invested in the company. So now, if you are forecasting in the short term that demand will fall, you wouldn't have to invest so much working capital into it, right? And there are other capital issues that decisions are supposed to be made on in demand forecasting. In a very big firm, firms that are listed on the stock exchange, for instance, such firms, they float shares. I don't know if you've in any of your courses you've talked about stock or shares before, but for a firm to get a lot of capital, they float shares on the stock market. Floating shares is more or less like advertising the company, telling people that the company is very good, it has a very good future, so people should come and invest their money into it. When the company earns profit, you give them some money out of the profits you get. So that is how, but to float shares or to require any capital and others, you would have to have an idea on what the demand will be. If the demand is not going to be very high, there is no need to float shares on the market for increase in capital. So let's pause here and continue in the next slide. Thank you.